Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Good evening and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And I'm Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist and supervisor. And welcome, thank you for joining us to our weekly opportunity to talk about all things sexy.
Yes, indeed. As you like to say, every day should be Sex Talk Day, but we like to have our Fridays with you to do just that.
Right. So we're here every Friday, 7 p.m. on the East Coast time, on Facebook and YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So again, thank you for joining us. One of the things we like to start with our show is looking at sex in the news. So what do we have for today's selection?
What's our first item in the
I have
news?
a couple of things to choose from.
An interesting piece on some change in language from the Trump administration, imagine Trump wanting to change something Obama did.
Right. And during a time where everybody is thinking about other things. Right? We've said this before. Please don't let all this corona hysteria and all this focus, let these other things go by unnoticed.
Right. Like right now, as a matter of fact, instead of the Senate voting on money to help people out of this crisis, they're affirming right-wing judges using the best.
That's right.
Best use of their time. So this little item talks about changing the definition of sexual harassment to actually make it less specific. Or it used to be, under the Obama administration, sexual harassment was defined as any unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, granted, that is sort of general and subjective.
Sure.
But that's an important piece to a lot of this, because how people experience this behavior.
Right.
Again, especially the unwanted part. But Betsy DeVos has just sort of issued a new set of guidelines that especially is going to go into effect on college campuses.
This is horrendous. I will read directly from the piece. The misconduct must fall under certain categories, including unwelcome conduct that is, quote, so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, end quote, that it, quote, denies a person equal access to the school's education program or activity, end quote.
So in other words, sexual harassment, sexual violence are going to be the same thing. The only way somebody can actually make a legitimate claim for being sexually harassed is if they were so abused and traumatized that they can no longer set foot on campus or in a classroom or live a normal life.
And it obviously puts the burden on the victim,
right,
to prove that they were harassed,
right,
that they suffered so greatly.
That's
and
right.
Imagine this president being eager to dismiss casual charges of
right,
sexual harassment.
And I will also say that the document also goes as far as to say that the victim, the person making the claim, kind of has to be grilled by a representative or an attorney in a public forum in order for this charge to be even considered.
Yeah.
Right. So this is real, real good social justice at work.
Any of our regular viewers starting to catch on to why we're constantly talking about frustration and aggravation working in the sexology fields?
Right. So let's move on to another news item that's a little bit more crazy, cheerful, makes the sunshine a little brighter and is kind of in that category of what shouldn't need to have to be said.
Shouldn't be. We should never see a headline in a newspaper, and this comes from across the pond, from England. The headline says, "Doctor warns against worrying trend of using toothpaste as lubricant from the Daily Mirror.
Yes. And it's specifying that apparently on social media, especially through Reddit, there have been all of these posts.
Several people shared their painful experiences on social media.
Right.
This is like the don't use the hairdryer in the shower label, right? Like, we really have to tell people not to use toothpaste on their genitals?
That's right. Either for masturbation or for intercourse, as it apparently has been used. So in that spirit of saying the things that don't need to be said, let's extend that warning.
Yeah.
Please don't put toothpaste on your genitals, and things like Bioflex or
Ben
Biofreeze, Ben Gay. Don't put that anywhere near your genitals either. And while you're at it, it's a good idea to keep your genitals away from open flames.
Yeah. It
needs to be said.
The only serious thing I could possibly pull out of this absurd piece is that old warning. We haven't really been talking about this, but it hasn't changed, that if one is using condoms, as one should be, especially outside of a committed relationship where both partners are sure of their STD status and contraceptive needs, one should not use oil-based lubricants with condoms because they dissolve. So
Right.
the old standby of Vaseline, you will hear a popping sound as the condom shreds off your penis.
Yes.
So water-based lubricants, Astroglide, and the dozens of other wet and slippery. There's all these wonderful products, but don't look around the bathroom for something squishy and slimy and lotiony just to use as lube.
Right. Just because you can squeeze it out of a tube doesn't mean it works well.
It's going to cause burns.
Yes, exactly. And you want to do one more?
Yeah, this is also worthy of mention. Right?
Right. And again, I think we need to start with the headline.
Man who had erection for 2 days had to undergo an operation as he thought his penis would die. And as wonderful a headline as that is, it is actually not too far from the truth.
Yeah.
Because there is a condition known as priapism, the erection that doesn't go down. And while, we've heard women joke about that, it is no laughing matter because we all have to remember what happens to blood that's not moving. It clots and
dies off.
Yeah, so that blood needs to leave the penis. So those scary warnings at the end of the Viagra commercials where they talk about erections lasting for more than 4 hours should seek immediate, their owners should seek immediate medical attention. Because that can, in the worst case scenario, become gangrenous.
That's right.
And require a penile amputation.
That's right. And in this particular case, this is referring to a guy who had basically a kind of a long-term, he had surgery, and as a result of surgery, he had this long-term dependency on OxyContin and other opiates.
But notice, it says here, the patient was taking codeine, oxycodone, and morphine sulfate after tearing a leg ligament in a skiing accident 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
So
now,
it also brings up the issue of this ridiculous overprescribing.
Yeah.
For a while, these docs were prescribing opiates like insulin. You need this for your baseline pain, and then you need another opiate for your breakthrough pain.
Right.
It's insane.
Right.
So people are ODing and having consequences like this. It's very rare, but sometimes with opiate withdrawal, which, opiates tend to mess with guys' function, maybe not so much erections, but they inhibit ejaculation. And in opiate withdrawal, everything is the opposite.
Right.
And there is this possibility of this condition called priapism.
Exactly. And it's not unusual, not just like you say, with people coming off of opiates, but also for people taking drugs like trazodone. We're seeing this with older men who are prescribed, that's sort of the, what was the old term for it? Prisonambian. That is used as a sleep medication primarily, especially for older adults. And we see that a little bit with older men as well. The erection pills and the legitimate ones, as well as the boner pills that you see on TV, which are all crap, they're all garbage. Yet some of those kinds of medications can also produce this condition of priapism. So something that we have
Stimulants
to be
as
aware
well.
of. Stimulants as well.
Cocaine and Adderall and things like that can cause this.
Right. So again, heeding those warnings at the end of those commercials. If you have an erection lasting for 4 hours or more, don't call your ex. Don't look for a hooker. Get medical attention, because it is now a medical problem.
That blood needs to come out.
Indeed.
Sometimes they have to take a needle and actually aspirate it.
That's preferable to the more extreme alternative.
Indeed.
Yes.
I'm Rachel Needle, co-director of Modern Sex Therapy Institutes. And Modern Sex Therapy Institutes is a continuing education provider. We provide continuing education for medical and mental health professionals around the world. And we have over 140 archived workshops on our website, so please check them out at www.modernsextherapyinstitutes.com. Also, we have a number of certification programs, including sex therapy, couples and sex therapy, LGBTQIA affirmative therapy, alternative relationships, transgender mental health care, medical sexology, sex education, and sex counselor certifications. In addition, we offer a PhD in clinical sexology. So please, again, go to our website, check out everything that we have to offer. A lot of our stuff is available solely online from the convenience of your own home or office. We do things live in 8 states and live via webinar as well.
I'm really excited for tonight. We have a very special guest, sort of our returning champion, as it were.
And gives us an opportunity to play with one of our favorite segments we like to call Boy Brain, Girl Brain. Lori Shapiro is a brilliant sex therapist, and I say that with some immodesty because I supervised her. So of course she's brilliant. But no, she's truly gifted, and we're very happy to have her joining us from Bethesda, Maryland. Well, hello and welcome back. We're on Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers with our favorite guest, the sexiest sex therapist we know, Lori Shapiro from the Bethesda, Maryland area.
I'm in the district. I work in
DMV,
Maryland and Virginia.
Maryland, Virginia.
As they like to call it, the DMV.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Good to see you.
Always our favorite returning guest.
Thank you.
That's our returning champion.
Dear friend of the show.
Thank you.
And our favorite contestant for one of our favorite segments, Boy Brain, Girl Brain, where we like to take the opportunity to talk with women therapists, female identified therapists, we should be PC. And
yes, I am a cisgendered female therapist. Yes.
But we've been talking saying this for years. It's not sexist to point out that there are very clear, obvious differences between boys and girls, and boy brains and girl brains,
Right?
And Y chromosomes and the lack of one. Right. This is not an issue of political correctness. This is our biology.
Right.
Right. And we can try to change our nature. For the most part, men do, I think. And I think it could be argued that modern society, I think of Marianne,
Faithful Williamson,
Marianne Brandon from your neck of the woods.
She's from my area.
And her brilliant book on monogamy, the untold story.
And she does a lot of the, God, I can't think of the word, but the level of psychology she does related to like anthropology. She's an anthropologist.
Cultural anthropology.
Yes. And you know what? When she came and spoke at the Modern Institutes of Sex Therapy, when I was a student, that was profoundly impacting on my practice with people, because she really opened my eyes up to things that I was not entirely familiar with. So
and for me too.
People who do the work that we do, who also study things outside of our general purview, has been fabulous. So if anybody's listening who wants to go sex therapist, Modern Institutes of Sex Therapy is the way to go.
Thank you very much for the plug. And so, yeah, she rocked my world too, because this may be, I have to cop to some sexism, but this, like you, strong, professional, driven, ambitious, independent woman. And to hear a woman like that say, maybe we need some of the more traditional, maybe in the bedroom, women should let men be more men and women should be a little more demure. It was kind of shocking right? It's not so you. So
Absolutely. And I think talking about that it's okay as a woman to be both strong, independent, but also be coquettish and playful and fun. Like you don't have to be a complete feminist or a complete submissive.
So we've been talking about couples, all sex therapists see all the time, couples with mixed libido, mismatched libido, or different
I find
desires.
that
Especially
so
now.
often.
Which I would say is one of the most difficult things for sex therapists to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Navigate, absolutely. And what I continue to find in my practice when I'm working with people, especially doing some of the individual work, really giving people the opportunity to talk to me alone, you know, in that space where there's no filter. Like, I'm not going to upset my wife. I'm not going to upset my husband, but really talking about what the bottom line is. And more, the more that I hear these people, the more that I talk about them, the more I realize, and I will say this out loud because I'm proud, I'm a 51-year-old woman and I'm the mother of 3 children. And so who I was in my 20s and who I am in my 50s, sexually, spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally, has changed significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've come to think about more and more is that if you think about like 150, 200 years ago, you know, the lifespan of people was what, 30, 40 years. So you had this strong biological urge for procreation from about 14 to about 20. You have this deep drive, have a baby, have a baby, have a baby. It happens a little later now, but then women have a baby and their sexual drive shifts from procreation to visceral. So in order for me to feel sexual, and I mean me, the universal me, I need bonding, safety, comfort, the ability to be vulnerable, and the ability to be accepted as who I am, physically, psychologically, and socially. Whereas men, in my opinion, and what I've read and what I understand, they have a much longer ability for procreation. So it could be from 13, 14 to 70 years old, maybe even older. So their drives are still very biological. Of course, there's visceral pieces and visual pieces, but I think what happens is that, and I hear this time and time again, it's not my imagination, this is what men tell me. My wife doesn't want me anymore. She doesn't covet me. She's not sexually attracted to me. She's not, you know, when we're having sex, she's not into it like she used to be. And what I keep coming up against is that it's because it's not him. It's them as a couple. And it's him understanding her biological shift, that she no longer has this 24/7, pardon the expression, female hard-on. Her hard-on now is in her brain. And so if you can massage that, and I'm not saying be disingenuous or pretend, but if you massage the things that are important to her, how she feels about the kids, how she feels about the job, her need for, you know, some affirmations on some level about the job she's doing overall, just like he needs for her, also the non-sexual touch outside the bedroom. So many women I talk to them about, and it's amazing. I have one-on-one sessions with women where there's like no physical contact between husband and wife. And I say to her this, I say, I suspect the reason there's no sexual or physical contact between you and your husband, because every time outside the bedroom, you let him hug you, kiss you, or touch you, you're scared that's a green light for intercourse.
Yeah.
And they're like, yes. So the whole thing is
I've heard
teaching
that
them
1,000 times.
Right, getting back to being physical and touchy-feely without it being a green light to put your penis in me. Who knows? Who knows what the psychology is of her for that day, which has nothing to do with him. And men are like, wow, I never thought about that. I never thought that the brakes that she's putting on has nothing to do with me. Right. Because what happens when nobody gives you any information, what do? We create our own narrative.
Absolutely.
That's right. We fill in the blanks. You know, it's kind of like that gestalting. You know, in order to make things make sense, we are going to connect the dots in a way that, you know, kind of serves us, even if it doesn't make us feel good. Right? Now, do you find that some of those old stereotypes really, really do hold true? Like, you know, especially in long-term couples, we get in some of those, and even I think sources of resentment, where the women in general, again, we're talking about heterosexual relationships for the most part, where the women kind of really want to feel more special, as opposed to guys that want to feel necessary or needed.
Yes. And I think that happens a lot because what happens is we stop seducing each other. It's a given. It's 9 o'clock. She wants to go to bed. He wants to watch TV. So nothing happens, you know? And so what I say to them, I'm like, why can't you guys go into the bedroom at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, have an hour alone doing anything? It doesn't even have to be sex. Touching, kissing, hugging, talking, making the other person feel what they need. Because men want to be coveted, women want to be pursued. And it's like, why can't we give that to each other? And I caution people, and I know that gender role stereotypes are not 100% down the road. You know, I see it the other way, where the husband has the lower libido, the wife has the I see it on both sides. When I started in this field 30 years ago, you know, being a young person, I was so like gung-ho about not, you know, putting people in boxes, which I don't. But there are things that are super universal.
What I'm thinking, because I'm teaching this in one of my other classes right now, it's just funny that it's coming up in this way, you know, this concept of a genetic leash, that, you know, even though we do have enough flexibility in that whole epigenetic world that people like talking about now, where we can break out of a lot of those stereotyped dynamics that are a function of genetics, they're a function of biology, they're a function of enculturation for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. That there's still something, there's still
and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, there's still a biological template that, you know, we are, unfortunately, predictable organisms. You know, what you're describing to me, the way I hear it, and what a lot of these women are wanting and what women are asking for, it's more about erotic play and dynamic. For guys, it's sexual. So where, you know, why it's important, I think, to sometimes put the brakes on the intercourse. And I used to put couples on an intercourse ban. You know, even if they came in and say, we haven't had intercourse in the last year. It's like, okay, you know what? For the next couple of weeks, you're not allowed. And it's kind of amazing how many times that alone allows them to bring together.
Yeah.
But I think there's that difference.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, which is why so many women that you're describing and that are talking to you in that way are probably, you know, almost fearful of that kind of intimate, erotic play or contact, because the guy takes that right into intercourse or right into something sexual. She may just want something intimate and erotic.
And I work a lot in alternate lifestyles. I do a lot of BDSM and kink. I work with a lot of poly couples. I work with a lot of transgender couples of every constellation you can imagine. And what I would say is that for like vanilla heterosexual cisgendered couples, I absolutely try to incorporate power dynamics and, you know, erotic play and things that are outside their typical purview, because I think that these things are going on anyway. There's all kinds of these power things that are happening outside the bedroom. And I'm like, how do we bring that in the bedroom? You know, if you want her to initiate, like women are like, I feel like I do initiate. And I'm like, what do you do? And they're like, well, I asked her he wants to go have sex. And I'm like, that's not really initiating. I'm like, if you really want to initiate, show up in the bedroom naked. Like, that's a much stronger sign than, hey, you want to go do it because it's my job. You know, you don't have to do all that much. If you show up in the bedroom naked and lay down and kind of splay, they're going to get the full picture that you're interested in having sex with them. And my generation, we were brought up with, there's two types of orgasm. Right. There's clitoral and there's vaginal. And we all grew up thinking that. And so there's this whole generation of women who are like, faking it and performing and thinking they need to be like porn stars, and they're not taking responsibility for their own sexual pleasure and communicating with their partner what I need and what I don't. Sometimes women don't come during sex, sometimes men don't, and let's get out of and there's nothing wrong with porn. You can watch porn all day long, I don't care. But let's get out of the porn mentality of being actors and actresses and be real with each other.
Right.
But that is one of those, that's one of those sexist things that persists that we have to break down. That men take it as a given that a woman might not orgasm every time, so he doesn't necessarily have to take it personally unless he's going on that script that my worth as a man is based on my ability to get her.
I see men like that all the time. They're like, if she needs her vibrator, there's something wrong with her because all the other girls come, you know, with my penis. And I'm like, well, either you're a really lucky guy that you've met like the 1% of the population, or they're faking.
Yeah.
Let's do the math.
But it is true that for guys, it's 100% of the time or catastrophe, right? One
Mhm.
time a guy doesn't come and it's like, oh my God, what's the matter? You're not attracted to me.
Mhm.
It's over. You're thinking of somebody else.
Right.
So that
Mhm.
we need to accept that men don't have to come every time either.
And let's also acknowledge a reality that people don't really talk about is that, especially guys that get older, when we look at guys over the age of 50, you will find that many guys get an erection. They're great in terms of maintaining it throughout their intercourse, but they
Mhm.
don't come.
Not every time, absolutely not,
Right.
nor should they have to.
That's why
Right.
I think, so much of what we do, a lot of, our field is just as guilty, in talking about intercourse and orgasm as the main events, and talking about what people should be
Mhm.
working up to. So, we've been switching gears for the last couple of years, but you're right. Laughter is so important, as long as it's not, accompanied by pointing and, covering your mouth.
Pointing and
To make
sniggering,
it fun. And that's why this non-demand pleasure, having people spend
Mhm.
time specifically and intentionally not having intercourse, specifically and intentionally not orgasming, just focusing on the pleasure and the play.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I
Oh,
found the biggest thing during Corona that I've been having people do, and it sounds very like Psych 101 kind of crap. I tell people with their children, without their children, twice a day minimum, find your partner and have a long, uncomfortable hug. And when I say the long, uncomfortable hug, I mean it's the one where you don't have the butt out and you're like
Right.
pat
That
pat. I mean the
reframe.
one you're like heart to heart, you're hugging like you mean it. After a few seconds you're like, should I let go? This is starting to feel weird. I'm like, hold on for another 3 seconds and really do that. Do it together, do it with your kids, do it as a group, do it as a family.
that's
Go
true.
into the long uncomfortable hug, because that's intimate. That's where intimacy is. I mean,
Oh.
intimacy is not anything before that. Because I think when I think about some of the hottest sex I ever had, it was completely clothed and rubbing all over each other and making out and doing the yes, no kind of crap. Like the intercourse was so much further down that line, and we forget that all that other stuff is so good. All that stuff is so good.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a nutshell, what's wrong with men and how do we fix them?
Get out of your head. Stop thinking it's you. Stop thinking she doesn't want you. She doesn't covet you. She doesn't love you. She doesn't want to have sex with you. And instead, remind her why she does. That you're her partner and her friend and you think she's beautiful and sexy. Grab her butt in the kitchen, brush the hair out of her face when all chicks, this is like every chick in the 80s movie. Every 80s movie is like,
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? Push the hair out of her face. Tell her dinner was delicious. Remind her she's valuable. The more she feels like you care about her, the more sexually attracted she is to you, unless you're a smelly slob, of course. But, if you're a good, decent guy and you remind her that you love her, she will be more into it. Don't remind her what she's doing wrong. Remind her what she's doing right. Allow her to be physically close to you outside the bedroom, because then when you're in the bedroom, she'll want to be physically close to you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, cheers, my lady.
Yes, indeed.
We'll have
Yes,
to wrap.
indeed.
With
I love
that.
talking to you guys.
Always a pleasure to have
Yes,
you on.
truly.
And we'll do it again very soon.
And you can see why she's one of our favorite people.
Yes, we love having Lori on the show.
Indeed.
And hopefully we'll again soon.
Yes, so thank you again. So, to sort of wrap this up for the week, some of the things that we want to emphasize, and again, recapping some of the things that we just talked about with Dr. Shapiro, it's important that we understand, especially as we get older and especially as our life circumstances change, that our sexual templates, our sexual desire is going to change as well. And it's particularly powerful, often the way it changes after childbirth for women.
Right. Yeah, I think men would be wise, but folks with boy brains would be wise to make the effort to understand, to understand girl brains and be able to work it out. And especially as relationships mature, as folks mature, if there's hope for a long-lasting relationship to have legs, as we say, we have to change. We can't expect men and women to be as horny as in their 50s as they are in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And men have to understand that desire and arousal and horniness changes for women.
Right.
At different stages and ages of their lives.
That's right.
That, as we talked about, this idea of stereotypes, everybody thinks stereotyping is always a bad thing. But if we're talking about our very nature, it's not an overgeneralization.
Right. So, some of these issues that we can say are typically female type of issues. We look at these issues that we can say typically are male type of issues. A lot of people don't like hearing that, there is this sort of stereotypic mating behavior that we're still kind of biologically subject to. Now, the good news is that even though we're talking about some of these typical kinds of behaviors, and that's really what we mean by these stereotype behaviors, typical behaviors that we see among males and females. As we mentioned in the interview, there's a connection, that sort of leash that connects our genetics with our culture. And as our culture continues to change, so will a lot of these stereotyped behaviors. We already see how in relationships in general are changing. And within these relationships, what we consider to be male dynamics or female dynamics, those are also changing. So all of this stuff is in flux. And when we look at what is typical now, over the next 20 years, it's not going to be so typical, right? Like with everything else that we can talk about and have been talking about the last couple of months, there is going to be another new normal for us to contend with. So it's about how do we create these new standards together in our relationships, how we work cooperatively with one another, and not just hold to what we want or what we think things should be in the relationship. And to kind of piggyback on something you said earlier, not stay focused in any way on the way things used to be. Right? That's not good nostalgia when it comes to negotiating the sexual part of a relationship.
Yeah. So I guess that'll do it for us for this week for Sex Talk. And since we're no longer on terrestrial radio, I think I'm allowed to say I've been stroking your pussy under the table while we've been talking this whole time.
Yes, and would it be weird if I said it was gratifying?
Please, thank you so much for joining us, and please join us next Friday and every Friday for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.